Digital Foundry is proudly sponsored by Omen's new wireless range of mice, keyboards and headsets. With the arrival of Mafia Definitive Edition, the trilogy is finally complete. All three games are brought up to date to modern consoles, and today we have a chance to see a real evolution in developer Hangar 13's tech. And it's a curious one. Despite being the oldest game by design, this Definitive Edition leapfrogs its sequels in engine features. Improved materials, global illumination, and vastly updated reflections are among the highlights. Now, I had a chance to speak to the studio's art and rendering teams to understand how some of this works. So just how much of an upgrade is it over the previous games? How do all the consoles compare? And how does it pave the way for next-gen features? Let's find out. Before we start, let's run through the tech details. The native resolution side is simple enough. On PS4 Pro, you get a native 2560x1440. As with all versions, this is backed by a form of temporal anti-aliasing, causing some banding, but it does a solid job all round. Xbox One X, you'd have thought, would bump up the pixel count, but no. Instead, it's also sharing that 1440p native res with PS4 Pro. Looking to the base machines, you're getting 1080p on PS4, and meanwhile, there's a lower still resolution on the base Xbox One here, running as it does at 900p or thereabouts. There are checker artifacts on every platform when freezing a frame and looking close, but in motion it's hard to catch, and the higher the resolution goes, the less noticeable it becomes. As a game built for consoles first, it's great to see so many features translate evenly to all machines. The materials, the volumetric effects across Lost Heaven, in side-by-sides between Xbox One and X, the differences are few and far between. That being said, X does enjoy a unique boost over all other three consoles. Yes, the resolution may be 1440p, a match for Pro despite the power gap, but its power gets tapped into in other ways, like high quality shadows and ambient occlusion. Most settings on X translate to PC's medium preset, though with geometry and volumetric set to high. Otherwise, well, it again comes down to that resolution boost. Compared to the base Xbox One here, it's 900p versus 1440p, giving a clear, visible advantage. A few other points stand out. I immediately noticed the base Xbox One has some issues with dithering, on hair or any fine detailing. It sticks out a bit when jumping from any other platform, giving these materials a rougher look, but that's the only nitpick. Traffic draw in the big city is impressively close all round, plus all run with a 30fps cap with VSync. That is with the exception of base PS4, which, if we're talking image quality, is unique for having a screen tear, an adaptive VSync method that has frames cut midway. More on the performance side later, but it's not something we have on Pro or any of the other consoles for that matter. So in what ways is the Definitive Edition an upgrade on Mafia 3? Well, the original Lost Heaven City design is used as a kind of blueprint, but it is far from a reskin. The team tells me it's used as a starting point, but the meshes are rebuilt entirely over the top. In the end, it keeps the layout similar enough. The outskirt areas, the countryside, are broadened out over the original and fully integrated into the city map now, so you can travel seamlessly between them. The result is an overall map size that's similar to Mafia 2's, though the third game still has the larger size overall. But the quality of the map is much higher than 3's, no doubt. For a start, the approach to physically based rendering has been updated to GGX PBR, allowing for parameters like roughness on textures to be tweaked, not possible before. Plus, all-round texture quality in Definitive Edition, the team explained, is more consistent across the world due to more effective memory management. A smaller game in scope than Mafia 3 then, but the materials within it are on paper a huge upgrade. Next, there's the lighting model and reflections. We have the team's all-new in-house global illumination at play across Lost Heaven now, which in essence means a more accurate simulation of how light indirectly bounces between surfaces. The team at Hangar 13 explained this is the most significant rendering upgrade since Mafia 3, and it shows in cutscenes especially. The new GI approximates how light reflects from surfaces, cars, characters in broad daylight, giving all objects a more natural position within a scene. It's fully dynamic and fully real-time, letting the artist set up lights with cube map probes for a more immediate result in the level editor. In other words, more realistic results from the game world and faster to create too. All of this ties into the improved materials and of course a new reflection system too. Now this comes out best at night with plenty of puddles to reveal mirror images of the scene. It's not hardware based ray tracing. Hangar 13 confirms that RTX support is being explored for the future, but for now we have a software based solution that produces surprisingly accurate results. It's described as ray traced SSR using cube maps with multi-bounce GI already factored in. Something that is possible on current gen GPUs. This uses screen space marching as a starting point, which is familiar to most games, using what's visible within the player camera to draw a reflection. Except from here, Mafia Definitive Edition goes one further. It can trace a ray to find a colour in a cube map with high quality lighting data, which is rendered at runtime to factor in the current weather and lighting. From there, that colour is drawn within the scene, around the player, onto puddles or wet roads, and the result can often be very convincing. In motion, Definitive Edition's reflections look very polished. We've seen it in the Trip to the Countryside mission already. There are at times small issues in occlusion, headlamp reflections for example that appear in front of an intercepting car, but all round it's easily one of the best and least artifact prone approaches I've seen this console generation. If this is what's possible in GPU-constrained hardware, I'd love to see what Hangar 13 can do with hardware-based ray tracing down the line. But for now, this is one of the smartest approaches to software-based rendering of reflections I've seen. A lot of the rendering tech in Definitive Edition caters to current-gen specs, machines with low-clock Jaguar cores, which makes open-world rendering a challenge at anything higher than 30 FPS. As such, it'd be fascinating to see a next-gen reworking, a remaster of a remake if you like. We've seen it recently in Spider-Man Remastered as an option in its latest trailer, alongside modes for higher resolution and real-time ray tracing. All great options, and it'd be great to see the Mafia trilogy move away from 30 FPS 2 for PS5 and Series X. For that, we'll have to wait and see, but for now, the setup on Xbox One and PS4 machines settles at 30 FPS, with varied results. The good news first, Xbox One X, very solid all round in delivering 30 FPS and it's fully VSync too. The horsepower it has as the generation's frontrunner doesn't translate to a higher resolution than Pro, but it does get better settings and also a smoother frame rate. The PS4 Pro version meanwhile does seem to struggle a bit more in its delivery. It's hitting 30 most of the time, but do expect drops to the mid-20s at points as well, especially when it comes to high-speed chases. Again, a majority of play is, I will stress, at 30 FPS. The stress points seem to be the countryside missions like Ordinary Routine here. Put it down to a lot of draw calls on foliage and the speed of the chase, but it does start to chug a little bit. Otherwise, on-foot action with shootouts is as solid as Xbox One X and really not an issue.
Get over here now!
Looking to the base machines next, there's a similar pattern. Most of play can unfold at 30, but inevitably these are more prone to drops. You've got hitching when the camera switches view most notably. That flares up in the very first mission, losing your tail using these scripted maneuvers with lots of camera cuts drops Xbox One and PS4 into the low 20s. Both are in the same ballpark in this sense, the drops are just as extreme on both. The exception of course is base PS4 has screen tear that doesn't feature on any other platform. Ideally then, the Definitive Edition is far better played on enhanced machines and ideally Xbox One X. For the tighter lock at 30 FPS, for higher resolutions at 1440p and for heightened settings, X is clearly the one to go for. For all the tech advances here over previous games though, something had to give on the standard PS4 and Xbox One, and while typically solid, the drops when they do happen stand out by eye. The mentality makes sense though as we broach a new generation. Hangar 13 is doing its best to squeeze more from existing hardware, while in all likelihood giving a potential next-gen release room to flourish with more progressive visuals. We'll have to wait and see on that front though. The upshot then, performance can hit a bottleneck on current gen machines, but we've never seen the Mafia series looking quite this good. That's the trade-off. It's a marked upgrade on Mafia 3 from 4 years ago, of course. Again, vastly updated reflections and GI are the standouts, and the future looks promising for the series, especially if this translates to a full-blooded sequel, Mafia 4 perhaps, with all of this tech applied to a fresh new scenario. But that's all from me today for this quick look. If you did enjoy this or find it insightful in any way, don't forget to like or subscribe, and don't forget to hit that bell to get notifications as any new video lands. To get this video at high quality, check out our Patreon at digitalfoundry.net, and to get in touch with me or the team, just use Twitter. But from me for now, thanks for watching. Featuring its new Warp wireless technology, Omen's PC peripherals allow for lag-free gaming. From the 360-degree audio of its Omen frequency headphones, the 180-hour battery life of the Vector mouse, and the 2.4 GHz connection of its Spacer keyboard, Omen has you covered for the ultimate wireless experience.